Well, good morning, everyone. My trusty cell phone says it's 9 o'clock, and Apple's never wrong, right? Or at least that's what I'm told. So we'll go ahead and get started. I want to thank everybody for joining us today for our April webinar. As you know, we try to make contact with you one way or another every month. And so on months when we're not at a conference presenting or making some appearance, we like to have these monthly webinars. And then months where we are somewhere, like next month in May, we'll be at the budget workshops in the Clerk Treasurer School. We won't have one of these 2-hour webinars. Same for June, because we'll be at the annual conference. But again, glad everyone is here. If you know of anyone having any trouble signing in or connecting, you can. There was a number in the invitation that they can call that should be able to get them in, or they can call our office and get that number. So if somebody texts you and say, "Hey, I can't get in," just have them call the office, and our administrative staff can give them that number. And we are recording this, so it will be on our website in a few days, maybe a week, once we edit out some of the stuff that doesn't need to be there. And you can go back and view it if you just enjoyed it so much the first time, or if you know somebody that missed it, you can let them know that the recording will be on our website. We will have time after both of our presentations for Q&A. And in the past, there's been a chat box and a Q&A box, and this time there's just a Q&A box. So go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A, and we'll start with those once we're over with the presentations. Susan, is there anything I'm forgetting to say? I think you're muted.
No, I think you said everything.
Okay. And Susan, can you tell me, does the sun just came out and I have the blinds open? Is that too distracting? Is it too bright?
No, I think it's okay, but I did notice that if I move,
oh, that's
the problem.
The sunset. Yeah, I don't have that problem.
And that blind is closed, so I will just try to sit up straight and tall and be still.
You have that problem. I have the glare problem, so I hope that doesn't bother anybody too much. But we're going to kick it off with Susan talking about the ARPA reporting, and then I'll get into our SBOA resource library and go through some live on the internet examples, and then we'll open it up for the questions. So with that, Susan, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am really glad to be here with you all. It's nice to see the sun out, although as I demonstrated, it is very bright. So I'll try and make it so it doesn't shine into your screen behind me. But I do hope you're all having a great day. And one thing we'll start off with is American Rescue Plan Act reporting. That's coming up, as you know, on April 30th. So let's talk about that for a little while. If you remember, I mentioned at the last meeting that this was coming up and it would be a good idea to go ahead and establish your account logins and review some of those webinars that the Treasury has put out. So I hope you've had a chance to do that. But if you haven't, there's still time. We've got until April 30th to get that done. So the purpose of today is to show you where you can access the information that you need to create these reports or to complete them. And then we'll go through a few screens that you'll see and the information that you'll need to do the project and expenditure report. So with that, we'll go on to the next slide. This is the Treasury's website. And I hope you're all familiar with that, but if you haven't been there yet or visited that, here is the site that you can go to. And also the Treasury Portal, which is where you will have to submit the project and expenditure report. Have a link there for that for you. And then also, if you have any questions about the reporting, it's best if you go ahead and contact the Department of Treasury because it's their report and they know exactly what they want. So there's an email here that you can use, and there's also a phone number. I hadn't seen a phone number before, but it was in some of the webinars that I watched. So I put that on here for you as well. So on the next slide, it looks like Treasury is going to require you to have a login either through login.gov or ID.me. And there are specific instructions for either one of those on the Treasury's website. It walks you step by step on how to create your credentials using login.gov. There's also Treasury webinars on account creation and login and user roles. So if you have any problems with that, you'll want to take a look at that webinar. And then on the next slide, just to show you where to find it, there is a lot of information on how to create the credentials through ID.me. And if you look in that tan box there, where it says for more information, it says the ID.me site has has excellent instructions, but there are even more detailed instructions available for you at the link there. So do take advantage of all of those instructions and those webinars if that is something that you might have an issue with. Treasury has done a really nice job of having a lot of information out there on not only the American Rescue Plan, but also how to complete the reports and what's expected as far as record keeping. And they're constantly updating these. I was working on them last Friday. I was watching a few, and then I was trying to put the slides together for today. And I did most of that in the morning. And when I came back in the afternoon, they had added webinars. So they're continually updating their information that they have. But as of last Friday afternoon, these were the webinars that were available on reporting. And that January 2022 project and expenditure report is one that you'll want to watch because it deals directly with how to do the project and expenditure report that for you is due April 30th. There's also a reporting overview presentation and webinar, and then introduction into reporting and so on. So please take advantage of those webinars. They're very, very helpful. I've watched several of them. There's also some webinars on just the general uses. If you fall into one of these categories, they have a webinar available. I think we've talked about these before. I just wanted to remind you that if you have, questions on how these funds can be used, again, there's plenty of information on the Treasury's website on how to use that money. Now, as far as April 30th is concerned, there's really two things that you need to do for April 30th. One is that for non-entitlement units, you have to upload your agreements and supporting documents, and we'll talk about what those are exactly in a slide or two. This is just a one-time thing that you have to do to put your information into their system, and it's going to require uploading 3 documents. There is a separate webinar on this called NEU Intro to Reporting. The second thing you have to do, which is we've talked about before, is the project and expenditure report. And as you saw earlier, there's several webinars on that topic. There are 2 publications that you need to look at. One is called Compliance Reporting Guidance, and one is called the Project Expenditure Report User Guide. So there's 2 publications to look at when you're dealing with the project and expenditure report. Now back up on that NEU agreements and supporting documents, there is a separate reporting publication for that as well. And here it is. We have the NEU agreements and supporting documents, so that's what that publication looks like. These are the documents that you originally filed with the Indiana Finance Authority when you requested funding. So it would be a signed copy of the award terms and the conditions that you completed. You also had completed assurances for compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And also the actual budget amounts that you submitted so that they could do that calculation that, the award wouldn't be more than 75% of your budget. So all 3 of those documents you're going to need to upload into the Treasury's portal. Now, according to the webinar that I watched on it, if you are missing some of those documents for some reason, there is an option to describe what document is missing, and you can still go ahead and upload the other pieces of information. So on that webinar, just to kind of describe for you what it does, it does walk you through how to create your account and submit the required documents. And then it does, again, say if you have issues with submitting the documents, or if your email has changed, or if you have other questions, then you can contact, that email at Treasury or the call center. You can answer no with an explanation if you don't have a document. And they did emphasize in there that you'll want to use Google Chrome for this, because that plays well with the Treasury Portal. And here's what that looks like. There's again, the documentation it looks like it should be very simple. They ask you for 3 documents, and you just simply click on the upload files and choose it from your computer, or maybe you can drag it over and drop those files in there, and hopefully that won't take you very long. Okay, and then the second, the more time consuming project will be the project and expenditure report, again due on April 30th. And here's the 2 publications that you're going to want to have handy as you go through that. One is the compliance and reporting guidance. Please notice the dates on these. If you've printed them out before, they may have changed. February 28th, 2022 was the latest version I found of the compliance and reporting guidance. And then the project and expenditure report user guide, the latest one I found was April 1st of 2022. So what I want to do next is I want to go through each one of these very briefly, just so that you can be familiar with what's in them and have an idea of what is required in the project expenditure report. And of course, you're going to have to read them on your own, but at least this will be an introduction to that. So for the compliance and reporting guidance, there's a couple of parts to this manual. The first one is just general guidance, and it talks about, the key principles of accountability and transparency. It talks about the requirements, or the eligible uses, I guess, under section 603, which we all have memorized by now. Those 4 categories, responding to public health, premium pay, government services, and then infrastructure investments. Talks about those, talks about the final rule and what that has to say. And then it also talks about uniform guidance requirements for a federal audit, and then the award terms and conditions. So it's really a very concise piece of information of things that we've actually been talking about all year. So if you need a refresher on that, then you can go through those pages there. It also reminds you of the timeline. The funds have to be obligated by December 31st of 2024, and then expended by December 31st of 2026. So there's a lot of good information there. In the second section, it talks about the reporting guidance. So what reports are required. The interim report was just for certain units of government, and that's passed now. The recovery plan and performance report is only for such certain units, but probably almost everybody on this call today is going to have to do the project and expenditure report. And that's really actually is better shown on the chart that I have on the next slide. You can see on this chart, the first column is the tier that you're in. You might hear a reference to reporting tiers. So the first tier is for us would be the state of Indiana and Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. So those are really the only 2 that have to worry about being in tier 1. In tier 2, that is metropolitan cities and counties with a population below 250,000, which received more than 10 million in funding. And then 5 and 6 are probably most everybody here today, metropolitan cities and counties with a population below 250,000 and received less than 10 million in funding, or non-entitlement units. So if you ever wonder what tier you're in, you can look at these descriptions and find that tier based on this chart. If you wanted to be more specific and you wanted to see, Brownsburg, Indiana is in tier whatever, then you can go to that red highlighted link, and you can actually look up your city or town and find the tier by your name. So that kind of tells you then what is due. Now you can see here that April 30th is for the project and expenditure report for tiers 4, 5, and 6. Other tiers have already done some reporting. Okay, this chart gives you an idea of, when the reports are going to be due. You have to do this April 30th every year through 2027 if you've received ARPA money. And then it also tells you the period of time that is covered by this report. So this very first one is going to be March 3rd of 2021 to March 31st of 2022. Okay, so we're still in this first publication, the Compliance and Reporting Guidance, and it talks about the information that's going to be required in this report. You'll need certain specific pieces of information related to your project and a description. You'll need information on the amount of obligations or expenditures that you have, where your project is in terms of completion or if it's even been started yet, what kind of program income you might have, and then for populations over 250,000, that dollar sign shouldn't be there, sorry. You would have to show a budget, and then for certain expenditure categories related to public health and negative economic impact categories, there might be some demographic information that you have to provide. So let's talk about each one of those just for a couple of minutes so you can kind of get an idea for each one of those categories. In relationship to the project information, when you do your project and expenditure report, they're going to want to see the project name that you have given it, how you have identified it by a number. And then they're going to ask for the project expenditure category, which I'll talk more about that in a second. You also have to provide a description in between 50 and 250 words of how you're using that money for that particular project, and then your status of completion for the project. Now, the project expenditure category is in Appendix 1 to this manual, and that kind of sets your projects out into four well, it might be more than four, several broad categories. So example category 1 would be public health. And then to get more specific, COVID testing would be category 1.2. Premium pay is category 4, and premium pay for public sector employees would be 4.1. So you kind of get the idea there. There'll be a very broad category, and then you can look down the list and find something that you are specifically doing with these funds, and you can align it with that. Now, if you're primarily doing the revenue replacement, then that's category 6, and all you have to do is select 6.1 and for government services. So that makes it a little bit easier. Okay, obligations and expenditures. Once you've entered into a project, then there will be some questions about obligations and expenditures, how much money you've obligated this period, how much you have expended this period. And then for next year, you'll show not only what you have obligated or expended in the year, you'll also add to that how much you obligated or expended in a previous year to come up with your cumulative amounts. Now, the difference between obligation and expending, obviously expending is you've paid for it, you've dispersed the money. Obligating it would be more like if you have entered into a contract to spend that money in the future. So that's how they distinguish those terms. Now, in your project status, they make that pretty easy. They give you 4 choices. You've either not started it, you've completed it less than 50% or more than 50%, or it's done. So that part is pretty easy on the project status. Now, there is some information on demographics if you have certain expenditure categories, and those are 1.1, which all the ones is going to be public health, and then 2.37, which is negative economic impacts, or a portion of those. So if you do have that, then you're going to have to answer some more questions about what impacted or disproportionately impacted the population does this project primarily serve? And then it looks like they give you a selection there. And then if the project primarily serves more than one impacted or disproportionately impacted population, then you can select up to 2 additional populations served. So there'll be a drop down there. If you have been using the money to respond to the public health crisis or negative economic impacts, then you'll be asked those questions. And then here's an idea of what they are giving you for choices for demographic distributions. For example, low or moderate income households or populations, or households that experienced unemployment and so forth. And they provide all of this information for you to be able to select it. Okay, the next category was subawards, contracts, grants, loans, transfers, and direct payments. If you have used the money for these types of purposes, then they are going to want information about those subawards, contracts, and so forth. So if you have a subrecipient, then they're going to want their DUNS information. They're going to need an award number, an award date, and payment methods, and so forth. So any kind of contract or subaward that you've entered into with another place, then you'll need to put that information in the project and expenditure report. And then on programmatic data, that's not required for all expenditure categories. It's only required for some. And that would be, as an example, like the number of households you've served or specific types of capital expenditures, the purpose of funds for subawards for travel or tourism or hospitality, or the number of workers served, for example, if you did premium pay. And then revenue replacement in this report, and I'll show you where it is in a little bit. You'll have an option to make your decision to select the $10 million standard allowance for revenue replacement, and that will be in the project and expenditure report due April 30th, 2022. And that is if you don't want to. I mean, you can always calculate revenue loss if you want to, but they've tried to make it really easy by allowing you to collect or to select that 10 million standard allowance. Okay, so that was the reporting and guidance publication. So it kind of gives you a very good overview of all the requirements of the ARPA money, and then the types of information that you'll be entering into Gateway for your projects. This project and expenditure report user guide is going to help you input the information or know how to input it. Just like the user guide does for the annual financial report that we have, they have a user guide for their portal as well. So it's going to go over the basic reporting requirements, how you navigate that site, what the requirements are, and then specifically how to enter information in the project and expenditure report. And then there are a lot of useful appendices here. Appendix B, there is a method where you can upload bulk file information. So if you want to do that, if you want to upload that information, then you'll want to look at that because they have templates available to you for those bulk uploads depending on the type of project or expense category that you're in. So you'll want to take a look at that. They have expenditure categories and the requirements for each of those categories, and whether or not you have to enter programmatic data or not. So there's a lot of very good information in here. And then they have a frequently asked questions section. So when you open up, and I only know all I know in presenting this is what I watched on the Treasury webinars. Unfortunately, I couldn't get in and create a practice, a practice project so that I could actually do it myself. But this is what I've gleaned off of the webinars. There's going to be a main menu section, kind of like our AFR, where they're going to ask you to fill out information related to your profile and then your projects and an overview of those projects. And then depending on what your expenditure category is, you'll need to enter information on your subrecipients and beneficiaries, or subawards and direct payments, or expenditures. Now, those three are not required for all projects, but they are required for some. So depending on how you complete that project overview and what expenditure categories you select will determine what of those three slides or screens you have to complete. And then there's a recipient specific section and a certification at the end, much like our annual financial report. So let's go through each one of those and just talk about these briefly. This is what the recipient information page looks like. Your DUNS number should already be there. I think you basically just have to review this and state that it's okay, or make any changes, like if you've had an email change or something on this slide. And that's pretty much all there is to the recipient profile, is just verifying that information. Metropolitan cities over 250 population. I'm sorry, I've got crazy with the dollar signs, I guess, making these slides. You need to do your budget approval information, and then SAM registration you will have to also enter in. And on the webinar, it said if you're not registered, you can select no there. So this is what the project overview slide looks like. I took this off of the webinar, so it's a little fuzzy, and I'm sorry about that. This is, you can look at it and see that it's a lot of tests that were done by Treasury, and they're showing, you know, what this looks like. But you'll enter in your project name, and that's just a name that you give it. You might want to make it very similar to the expenditure category name, and your project number, and then the obligations to date and the expenditures. And then the expenditure category, I'll show you where to find that. And then these green, yellow, and blue boxes will show up depending on whether you have completed that section, whether something is not matching in that section. I think that's the yellow. And then when it's red, you haven't completed it. So hopefully that'll become a little bit more clear as we go through. But you see it's project status, subrecipient status, and expenditure status. And remember, depending on your expenditure category, you won't always have to complete the subaward or expenditure status, and those might just automatically be green, depending on what expense category you've selected. Okay, so on the project overview, in this document that we're talking about, the user guide, it's Appendix C, and it's going to have your expenditure categories and template mapping. So the category 5.9, 5 would be infrastructure, utility infrastructure. 5.9 is clean water, non-point source. So if you had that one selected, would you have to enter programmatic data? Yes, and it's going to ask you specific questions to that expenditure category, and those will populate for you if you select 5.9. Can you upload information in bulk for that? And the answer to that is yes. You have to use expenditure category 5 template. So, and then there's a place in the user guide where you can find that template. You don't have to enter it in a bulk upload, but if you want to, you can, as long as you follow that template. Now, if you look down to 6.1, that's the provision of government services, which a lot of you are going to be interested in, and we'll talk about that one specifically. Do you have to enter in programmatic data? The answer is no, and you will use the revenue replacement module if you want to do a bulk upload. Okay, so back to that main menu category, subrecipients or beneficiaries. That profile is going to document the information about each subrecipient or beneficiary that you have that's received at least one subaward or direct payment of funding greater than $50,000. That's what they're asking for there. If you are selecting the revenue replacement option, then you won't have to fill out that subrecipient and beneficiary information. That's part of their streamlining process. And this is what this looks like in the portal. You can select to do bulk uploads if you want to at the top, but you're just going to be entering information for your subrecipients. Like I said, their DUNS number, their name, address, and so forth. The next category on that main menu is subawards or direct payments. It allows you to enter in the required information regarding subawards or direct payments of funding greater than $50,000. And again, this is not something you have to complete if you have selected the and use all of your money for the revenue replacement. Okay, now this recipient specific, if you look over to the left, sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but this is those categories you're going to see on the main menu, the recipient profile, project overview, and then I have circled recipient specific. This is where you're going to make your election for the revenue replacement if you choose to do that. And it's just going to ask, is your jurisdiction electing to use the standard allowance of up to 10 million for identifying revenue loss? And then you will answer yes or no to that. Now, after you do answer, assuming you answer yes to that, Todd, do I have something on the next slide? Oh, I don't. Okay. I have an example later. But when you answer yes to that, you'll be asked a couple of more questions, and we'll talk about those in a minute. After the recipient specific, there will be an expenditures tab, and you'll provide information for each contract, loan, grant, transfer, direct payment greater than $50,000. For those things that are contracts that are under $50,000, and you can report those in the aggregate. Okay. And then there is a certification at the end that this would be true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief. It does, like Gateway, provide you with submission errors. So it will provide a list of you if you have any of what those errors are. And so you can correct those and go ahead and submit. If you find out later that you have an error and you want to go back in and change it, you can unsubmit, but you have to resubmit by April 30th. So it's not like, you know, ours where you can go up until the time you're audited. This has to be done and completed by April 30th. So be careful about that. Okay, here's my example on revenue replacement. I think this is the last thing I have to do. When you're using the revenue replacement, you can use all of your award up to $10 million for revenue replacement if you want to do it that way. You don't have to, but you can. So you're going to want to use the project expenditure category group 6 for revenue replacement. And then 6.1 specifically is the provision of government services. So if you do select this and put this on your project overview, that's the slide that had the green and yellow and red boxes, then you should get a green box for the project status, and then you'll get green boxes all the way across because you're not required to have subrecipients, subawards, and so forth. So here is that. And this is based on the webinar. So if you want to watch the webinar, you'll see this slide. They did a test project where they entered in revenue replacement, and once they completed the information for that, then they got a green box in the project status, and then the green boxes for subaward and expenditure status automatically turned green because that's not required information for the revenue replacement. So again, here's that question you're going to be asked in this recipient specific information is if you want to select that $10 million election. And then you're going to be asked a couple of questions after that. So you can see here on this chart, I think this came out of the user guide. If you select the standard allowance, then you're still going to be asked whether fiscal recovery funds were used to make a deposit into a pension fund. And you're also going to be asked how the revenue replacement funds were allocated to government services. So you'll have to be, that'll be a field where you enter text on how you have used those monies. If you don't select the standard allowance, then you'll be required to answer a lot of information based, to calculate a revenue loss, your base year revenue and your growth adjustment, actual revenue, and estimated revenue loss. So there'll be some additional work if you do not select that allowance. So to summarize, just make sure you get your account login created soon so you don't have to panic with that, as it comes near April 30th. I would highly recommend watching the Treasury webinars. I found them to be very useful, and they have a lot of good information, and hopefully with today's information you at least have an introduction, so it'll be easier to watch those and know kind of what they're talking about in there. I would recommend reading the compliance and reporting guidance, or at least skimming through that, and definitely refer to the user guide. That will help you a lot as you go through and enter the information. And then again, just choose your expenditure categories carefully. Look at that Appendix 1 in the compliance reporting and compliance guide, or Appendix C in the project user guide, because that's going to tell you what expenditure category you select depends on everything else that you're going to be asked as a result later on in the project expenditure report. So make sure you choose those carefully. And then I guess that's all I have, Todd. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I did want to ask on this slide and the slide before it, were those pictures that one of your daughters took?
No,
Okay.
This one was not. She's taken some like that, but I didn't have a chance to ask her to send me one.
Oh, okay, that one's really good. So I thought maybe if she took it, we would give her kudos for that. But, as I am switching over, which takes me a little bit, I want to mention two things that I forgot to mention earlier. One is the materials for today. I sent out an email yesterday late through Gov Delivery. So those are the emails with the blue, sides, the blue bars down the side. They're not on our website yet, but they will be soon. So if you didn't get that email, you should be able to find the materials on our website either today or tomorrow. And the other thing I wanted to talk about was apologize for the delay in getting that to you. Susan is usually the one that runs all of this, and she's been really good at that, and I'm taking a shot at it this time. So there's my learning curve is coming in. That is why you got more than one invitation. The first one I went out had an error in it, and so I had to cancel that event and then send the second one out. So I'm sure that was confusing for people, and it was confusing for me. That's why I made the error. So I apologize for that, but I think now we are okay, and I hope you got everything. And if there was something you didn't get and you still can't find it, please let me know, and we'll get that to you. So my part of today, I'm going to talk about our new resource library. One of the other directors, his name is Chase Lennon, and he was tasked with this project a couple of years ago, and he's put a lot of work into it. So we hope you find it useful and a great tool for finding information that otherwise might not be very apparent. But it's a place you can go, search our website, search our materials by keywords or phrases, and I think you might be able to find what you're looking for, or the answers to your questions easier than maybe before, or maybe easier than a phone call or an email. So we would, suggest you look there first and see if that works for you, and then if not, you can contact us, obviously. But let's take a look at what's in this process and what you're going to be able to find, and what it all looks like. So first of all, let's talk about what is in the resource library. We have included the audit reports database, the State Board of Accounts compliance guidelines, summaries of the Indiana Code. We have our prior presentations and our training materials. We've got our a section for best practices, along with the frequently asked questions database. We have the things that are on our YouTube channel, and we have some other miscellaneous type items that are there as well. Before we go any further, I wanted to review what the compliance guidelines are. I know we have, after the first of the year, we have some new clerk treasurers coming on, or maybe some new deputies that are watching for the first time. So we wanted to get everybody used to that term. And we use that term quite a bit. And this may help your understanding of what a compliance guideline is. Per Indiana Code 5-11-1-24, the Board of Accounts is required to establish in writing the uniform compliance guidelines that include the standards that a city or town must observe in order to avoid a critical finding or a comment in a audit report. And that's for a reason other than a failure to comply with a specific law. So don't get me wrong, you still have to, comply with statutes. You have to comply with the law, but there are things other than the Indiana Code that you have to comply with, and these are the guidelines that I'm referring to. Those compliance guidelines can be found in the State Board of Accounts Accounting and Uniform Compliance Guidelines Manuals, the bulletins that we issue, and state examiner directives. And those compliance guidelines are what we would cite in a written comment as what you didn't comply with. So if you didn't file an accurate annual report, the criteria that requires that would either be an Indiana statute, it would be a compliance guideline in these manuals, or maybe the state examiner's directive. So those guidelines are important. You need to know them because those are what we're going to be looking for during an audit. So exactly what kind of things are in our manuals that you can search in this resource library? And we tend to get that question every once in a while about what is our manual. And not everyone realizes that we actually have an accounting manual. Back in the day, if you've been around and you're a seasoned clerk treasurer, you might remember we used to mail out the Cities and Towns manual. Every once in a while, we would revise it, and send out a couple 100-page manual, and then annually after that we might have different updates. So we would just send you those pages and you would update them, take the old page out of your hard copy and put the new page in. And since we don't do that anymore, I think it's easy to forget that there is actually an accounting manual. If you're not familiar with our manuals, they are on our website. I'm going to show you where those are in a little bit. And you can also obviously research or search through the resource library. Our manual covers our general audit positions and minimum requirements for certain things. It's also going to cover topical general standards like having a credit card policy or keeping a record of hours worked for all employees. In addition to the manuals, we issue the Cities and Towns. Nope, sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. We also have other manuals beside the Cities and Towns manual. So we have the one on regulatory reporting, the one on uniform internal controls, we have a manual on information technology, and if you have a city or town court, we have a manual specifically for courts. So I think a lot of times people are maybe aware of the Cities and Towns manual, but there are these other 4 manuals that we would audit for compliance with, as well as just the Cities and Towns manual. So keep that in mind, that there are other manuals out there. What about bulletins? People seem to be more familiar with the bulletins because we send those out, or we're supposed to send them out more timely. We send them out in March, June, September, and December. Although this month, well, with the March one, we were a few days late in getting that out. I think it came out a few days ago. So if you didn't get that, it is on our website. What we usually do is send out the Gov Delivery email to let you know it's available with a link to it, and then shortly thereafter it's posted on our website. So you get a couple of different opportunities to take a look at the bulletins. they are designed to supplement certain manuals. So we published bulletins not only for cities and towns, but we have one for libraries, special districts, counties, schools, and townships. And the bulletins typically contain new or updated audit positions or information that local officials need to be aware of. And we might mention items that are needed and that have a deadline, like the annual financial report or the annual highway report for those cities and towns over 15,000. You might see that in a bulletin as a reminder that that deadline is coming up. State examiner directives. You've heard us refer to those before, and you should see them when we issue them. They'll be issued individually and through the Gov delivery system. We also try to include them at the end of the bulletin corresponding to the quarter in which the directive was issued. So if we issued a directive in February, it'll be at the end of the March bulletin. If we issue one in November, it'll be at the end of the December bulletin. But a directive is a pronouncement from the state examiner that sets forth a policy or procedure that the board will use to enforce a law or uniform compliance guideline to conduct audits. And it's to carry, a directive is to carry out its duties as set forth in statute by the legislature. The directive is based on the general authority of the state examiner to carry out our responsibilities under Indiana Code 5-11-1 and other laws. And it may be a form of a uniform compliance guideline that's authorized under 511-124. So the state examiner has the authority to direct public officers in keeping the accounts of their offices, including the use of forms, records, and systems of accounting and reporting. And I hope it never gets to this, but I did want to point out that a person who refuses to follow a directive can be subject to civil action for an infraction. So now those are the types of things that are included in our resource library. And you might be wondering now, well, how do I get to that? If this is such a great tool that you seem to think it is, Todd, how do I get there? Well, to access the library, you can click on the resource library link located on the left side of the State Board of Accounts homepage. Or you can follow the URL there on the screen and go directly to the resource library's main page if you want to copy that and put it in your search engine. This is a screenshot of the resource library's main page. And as you can see, there's a search bar, which will search through all the information located in the library by keywords or phrases. If you have questions about how to use this library or you need more information on a topic that you can't seem to find, of course, you can contact us. You can either email or call our office. And we have provided the email. You can barely see it down there in the bottom left, but the links to the emails are there. Obviously, you would pick cities and towns, and there are others underneath that if the library wants to contact us or a county. So before I go over some of the individual pages within the resource library, you might wonder, why would you even want to use this? And there are several different answers. I can make the case why using the library would benefit many different audiences. But some of the more obvious benefits would be to efficiently search the Board of Accounts or search through our resources and our audit reports. You know, as a city or town official, you can enhance your knowledge about the different requirements to avoid findings in future audits. If you're interested in improving your office and the procedures in your office, you can research our best practices. And instead of searching through the Indiana Code, which can be difficult at times, you can quickly find some useful information in our summarized version of certain codes. Also, our prior presentations and trainings can be reviewed and used as a quick reference guide for certain requirements. So for example, if maybe you recall, we talked about the annual highway report at an annual conference sometime, but you don't remember which year it is. You can, search for it and it will pull up in the presentation and materials when we've talked about that, and maybe it was more than one, and well, I know it wasn't that year, it was this year, and you click on it and you can watch that again. But maybe the real question might be, why would you not want to use this? Because again, we think it's a very useful tool for you to have. So on this slide and the next few slides, I have some screenshots showing how to navigate through the library and what search tools are available. On the left-hand side of every page in the resource library, you're going to see a navigation page with links to different areas of the library. So on this slide, you can see that I have highlighted the audit reports page with a green arrow. So maybe you want to find out what your predecessor got written up for before you took office, and you want to look at their audit report. You can do that here. If you were to click on that, there's a search bar to search through the audit report filings with a link to the audit report filings database that you can use to find a specific report. So you could type in, I live in Pendleton, so I always use those as an example of the town of Pendleton, or just Pendleton search, and it would pull up the audit reports for Pendleton that have Pendleton in the name, and you could look at the report that you wanted to. On this slide, I've highlighted the General Uniform Compliance Guidelines section that has manual sections that apply to all unit types. So it's just not cities and towns under the Uniform Compliance Guidelines. Basically, this is chapter 1 of the Cities and Towns Manual, the information that you can find here. And because it applies to all units, it's chapter 1 in the Special Districts Manual, it's chapter 1 in the Libraries Manual, but it has a lot of information in it that will be useful if you're not familiar with what's in chapter 1 of the manual. So the box on the right pops up when you click on Uniform Compliance Guidelines, and there again is a search bar. Each page should only include a page-specific search tool that only searches through the page that you're viewing. So if you're unable to find what you're looking for, you can always go back to the resource library and search through all the content that's in the library. So if you had gone to the Uniform Compliance Guidelines and you were searching a word that didn't happen to be in that section, it's not going to give you a result. It's only going to search the Uniform Guidelines section. So here I'm showing an example of what the results would look like. So on this page, which is showing the Cities and Towns Manual, I searched for the word audit, and the search found 16 results. And there's a button under the search that you can click to jump to the first search result that was found. So if you click that button, it takes you to the first one. There's also in the upper right a box, a yellow box that will allow you to jump between search results by clicking the up or down arrow. So if you're on the fourth one and you want to go to the next one, you can use that as an easy tool to click and get to it, as opposed to like scrolling down to it or anything. Now you can find unit-specific manuals, like cities and towns, under the Unit-Specific Uniform Compliance Guidelines section of the navigation pane by clicking on the unit type that you're interested in viewing. So on many of our pages, you can see different content areas, and they're divided into sections called accordions. So if you click on a section such as the Use of the System section that I've highlighted in gray there on the bottom right. So I clicked on Cities and Towns. I'm at that place. I've gone down below the table of contents and clicked on Use of the System. Then you can search the use of the system within the cities and towns area of the library. If you click on this button on the right, to the right of where it says use of the system, that's the accordion. So that'll expand to all of the things and topics that are within that if you just want to look at a topic. And then you can click on it again. It closes it back up like an accordion. It opens and expands and closes. And you can do that with any of the areas there. I just highlighted the use of the system for this specific example. If you're looking to search through bulletin articles, let's say you know there's a topic, you know it was in a bulletin, you just can't remember which one it is. You can find bulletin articles issued for each unit type by navigating to the city or town specific compliance guidelines page and clicking on the link that I've circled. On the bulletin pages, we have organized the articles by topic in alphabetical order. And in each lettered accordion, you can click on the title of the article at the top of the section to jump down to that article. If you ever run into any issues while you're looking at the resource library or our website, we do have an email address that you can contact us and let us know what you're running into. It's webmaster@sboa.in.gov, and send an email and just describe what's happening and maybe your contact information. If you're running into certain things, it might be easier to discuss by phone. So if the webmaster can call you and walk through you with that, it might be easier. Or if you can take screenshots and include that in your email of maybe messages or errors that you're getting, I think that would be a good thing for them to have. So just know that if you run into issues, you can always give us a call or shoot the webmaster an email, I guess I should say. So let's take a look at how this works in a live setting. And so to do that, I will need to escape out of here and go to the internet. So Susan or someone, please tell me if you're not seeing the Board of Accounts website. And as I get through my note pages here, I want to take you through some certain things. So to find the resource library, you know, that one slide I had that's highlighted in yellow. So you just click on resource library. So this is our main page on the left-hand side, resource library. Once you click on it, this is what you're going to see. And I'm going to search credit card. You can see I've already searched that, so it popped up. Just maybe you want to know what our stance is on credit cards. You maybe know you're supposed to have a policy, but you're not sure what's supposed to be in it. So you can click on this, and it'll come up with all of these. So you can see there are 36 search results for credit cards. And you can scroll through. There are best practices. This one happens to apply to libraries and credit cards. This one applies to county auditors. Here is some presentation and training materials that include credit cards. Talk about it in the internal controls manual. If you're a special district, that's what that would look like. So let's go back to the main. And I'm going to look at, I talked about this in uniform guidance and how you can look through general information. And this is a better illustration of how the accordion works. You click on this, it drops down and it tells you everything about taxes, because that's the heading of this one. General information. Again, this is stuff from chapter 1. So you've heard us talk about paying for things in advance. Well, this is the criteria that says you shouldn't be paying for things in advance of receiving those goods or services. We talk about audit cost or anything else that's in the general information section is there. Same with our regulatory manual, our internal controls manual, and it has, you know, an appendix, our case studies, examples of internal control procedures, because we get a lot of questions about that. The different areas we've talked about: control environment, risk assessment, control activities. Gives you, you know, a lot of information on those items. You won't need the private examiner manuals. Sorry, I didn't mean to click on that. There's our IT manual. that you hear us talk about, and here's unit specific stuff. So in the cities and towns, I mentioned that earlier, the use of the system. Remember, I had a slide on that. So when you expand that accordion, it talks about the use of the system, or all of these other categories. I think one that is a little timely is the prescribed chart of accounts. And we've talked about changing to the 4-digit number. Those are listed here as they are in Chapter 3 of the manual. So there are your 4-digit fund numbers that you should be using. Those are here too. Let's see, I want to go back through. We have our Indiana code sections. We talked about some of our summaries of those things. So you're going to purchase some land, and there are statutes related to that, but you're just not sure where to find them. And maybe you've looked in the Indiana code and they don't jump right out at you. You can find some of them here. So it talks about purchasing agent, what a structure is, and some of those related requirements for purchasing land. You can see we have some of the most frequently used areas that have code references, so that you can look through those pretty quickly. We get a lot of questions on conflict of interest, so we've got links to that conflict of interest statute and some of the things that apply there. I wanted to show you the directives because I mentioned the directives. Those are located here, and they're in the accordion by year. So all the state examiner directives issued in 2021 and so forth are just by year, or if you wanted to look up by a keyword, and I'm going to look up moving traffic violations. I can type. Oh, you have to click the search over there. That came up 4 instances. I'm going to jump to the first one. It was in Directive 2015-1, and it's also moving traffic violations. That phrase appears within State Examiner Directive 2015-1. And I wanted to show you, if you click on this, because it's gone to the first one, now the second one, it kind of brings it up to the top of the screen. So that's how you can move back and forth between those. Another one I wanted to touch on before we wrap up is the presentation and training materials. This will break it down by unit type. So there's all of our training materials for all the different unit types. If you are a city, you can click on it and it will take you to the links to those things. So here is our YouTube channel link. Here's our monthly training sessions that we have available for this year. Here is the annual conference from last year, November of 21, and the different topics that were covered, fall district meetings, anything else, and it goes back several years. And again, if you have something specific that you want to search that we talked about, you just can't remember what conference or presentation it was, you can always type it in there. And I mentioned the YouTube. I want to show that real quick too. That link takes you right directly to our YouTube channel, and you can find all the videos and that we have here. And there's a search feature, obviously, within YouTube that you can search for something specific there. I mentioned the best practices too. That's an area. Here are some of our best practices. There's credit card purchases, your bank reconcilments. We get a lot of issues and questions on those. Some payroll activities that you can expand and look at or search for a keyword. So that's basically what we'll find in the resource library. And if you haven't been there to try it out, we'd recommend giving it a go. Just play with it and see if it's easy to find a topic that you're looking for, or you had troubles. Let us know what those troubles were. And you can, again, email the webmaster email address, and we can help you out with that, or maybe make a change or an adjustment to the way that the whole process works. So with that, I'll stop sharing here. And before we dive into just realize how bad that looks with, you can't even see me, not that you want to, but before we dive into the question and answers, I did want to discuss some changes that the Board of Accounts is going through, and specifically our directors unit. As you know, we have directors for all the different types of units that we audit. So Susan and I are cities and towns. We're also specialized in libraries and the special districts across the state. We have 2 directors for counties. We have 2 directors for schools and townships. So there's 6 of us. The one area we don't have directors for is our state agencies. You know, we audit the state and all the state agencies. We do audits of the state just like we do the audit for your local unit. So the state's always a federal audit, and so you can imagine what's entailed in that. I think last year, I could be wrong, it was either last year or the year before, they had 39 major programs. So if you've been through a federal audit, you know you had 1 or 2 major programs. The state had 39, and so it's very involved there. And without directors or somewhere that they could turn, it was creating a little bit of an issue with the agencies not being able to have someone with the Board of Accounts that they could go to for questions or advice, just like you come to Susan and myself for questions on cities and towns. So the state examiner look at different avenues of what we could do in that area. You know, we want to further our mission. If you remember, our mission statement says we're dedicated to providing the citizens of the state of Indiana with confidence in the integrity and financial accountability of state and local government. So we mentioned the state in our mission statement, and we want to, because it says the state, we want to do something to help promote that and help the state agencies like we help all the local units. So we are the state examiner and is working with OMB and the Auditor of State's office to create an area within our agency that state agencies can come and do that. This area is going to be just similar to how cities and towns are set up. So it's going to have directors, and they're going to be working with the state agencies, not only on questions and answers, but we're going to go in to these agencies and kind of review their procedures and look at how things are done to help with just the overall aspect of how the state agencies work and intermingle with the Board of Accounts. So how that's affecting everything is some of our current directors are transitioning into this new area that for the state agencies. The current thinking is that we'll have 2, maybe 3 right away. And Susan is one of those that is transitioning to the state assignment or the state agency part of it. So unfortunately for all of us, this is going to be Susan's last webinar, as she has started that transition for the last few weeks, and it's going to be a full-time thing for her now. And so this will be her last webinar. She will be in Michigan City. The board has wanted her to help with that conference and get everything going, and how that's, you know, once we get up there and get everything going, then she will be with the state directors area and not with cities and towns anymore. So I can't tell you how much I am going to miss having her as part of our team. She has saved my rear end more than I care to mention, but she'll do great with the state directors and getting that going. That was part of the reason she was tasked with that. So I know that'll be a success as that gets going. And it may take a few years to even get that up and running like the state examiner has envisioned. And I think eventually there'll be a couple of the other directors, the current directors, will transition into the state area as well. And so to fill those voids of losing Susan and eventually one or two of the others, we do have new people coming in. We have new directors. And there are two so far, and they'll be coming and working with me on the cities and towns initially. And then at the time in the next several months, when one of the other directors transitions over to the state, one of those two will fill that spot. So eventually there'll still be two people in cities and towns and two people in the other areas. But for right now, it's going to be me, just me on cities and towns and libraries and special districts for a few weeks while the new directors are wrapping up their field work. And they're both in different audits and different stages of those audits. So once they wrap that up, they'll be moving over. And then to help cities and towns and libraries and special districts in the interim until we can get the new people here and get them up and running and let them know, let them see what the directors actually do. The other directors in our office are going to be helping out. So what they're going to do is look through our emails, and the ones they can answer, they're going to try to answer. And the phone calls that are of a subject matter they can address, they're going to do that. So if you call in and I'm not available, that call is probably going to go to one of the other directors. And if they're not available, then we'll take a message and somebody will call you back. If you send an email in and they happen to grab it and answer it, it'll have a different signature because it's coming. It may come from cities and towns from that email address, but it might be one of the other directors. So I wanted to I know some of those have gone out already, and I wanted to let the rest of you know what names to expect, so you would know it was like, who's this person? So you might be getting emails from Lori Rogers or Ricky Hofer. Lori and Ricky are our county directors. Or you might get an email from Chase Lennon or Jonathan Winnegar. There are schools and townships directors. So don't be shocked if you see an email that's signed by one of the four of them instead of me. And I'll go ahead and give you the names of the two directors that are coming in, because man, as soon as they get up here, I'm going to have them hit the emails hard. And their names are Stacy Burns and Michael Crowley. So eventually you'll see emails signed by one or both of them. And again, that's just not to alarm you or think it's not an accurate email or a real email. It is somebody from the Board of Accounts. We just have other people helping out to answer those while we can. So